boy do I feel dumb. I've got two versions of this running in my house right now. The original is the 3025, and that runs on 15 volts DC. I got a second one, it was a 3024, just a slightly older version. And it came with a power supply, but it's all taped up and nasty. It looked like it had been repaired a few times. I'm like, I don't want to use that. I'll just buy the same power supply, the second one that I'm using on the 3025, the 15 volt DC. And it worked perfectly fine. And then here I am going like, oh, the 3025 also worked on 12 volt DC, so I got a bit of room, trying to get this thing working. And then I take a look. AC. This is the older version and it takes AC in, which explains why I'm getting all this noise on the reception. I was going, this is almost like a 60 hertz hum, but that doesn't make any sense because I'm feeding it DC, which would mean that this power supply is bad. But no, it's actually in here that, because that power supply worked perfectly fine on the other one, so it can't be the power supply. So what I've been doing is I've been inadvertently, let me plug this test run in here. So what I've been inadvertently doing is just directly injecting DC into this, and luckily enough the center pin, well, I guess it really doesn't matter, it'll take whatever and just feed it through the bridge rectifier. And if I crank the voltage up high enough on here, then it actually gives me a working channel. Sometimes. I think I have to punch it in. Either way, I have to reassess how I'm going to be powering these things. There we go. Look at that. Perfectly clean. So I'm going to look at the power supply circuitry in here. Might just take an old laptop supply. It can give me around 17, 18 volts under load and just go directly into here, and then this thing's going to regulate and filter and regulate the voltage, and there'll be enough voltage drop in there. It should be okay. I just want to make sure that whatever's in here isn't going to get too hot. And I have no idea how that 3024, the other one I'm using, is working so well. This is another 3024 because I'm feeding it from a 15 volt supply. And over here, if I bring it down to 15 volts, it starts to freak out. Yeah, the voltage is too low once it goes through the AC to DC conversion in here. Interesting. Just one other thing to add. Any power supply that runs on AC and doesn't have a step-down transformer can theoretically run on DC, because your DC will still, instead of having a wave going up and down and then being, moved over to the top with the bridge rectifier, even half-wave rectification, it's still going to be able to pull that out of DC and feed it through. You're just going to end up with a bit of voltage drop depending on what it's doing with the waveform. But if there's a step-down transformer, then yeah, AC only. Some of the old radios, the old series string radios, used to say AC-DC on the back because they were transformerless. They had like old tubes, and the tubes would all run in series for their heater elements. The voltage breakdown was shared, so if they reach 12 volt tube, 12 volt tube, 12 volt tube, 35 volt, 50 volt, that all adds up to 115. Somewhere between 110 and 120 volts. And then they would just get the B plus from using the rectifier to convert the AC to DC, and you get like around 170 volts DC. But those could run on DC if there was some weird, back in the old days and not all the power connections were standardized. It could run on DC at like a farm or something if you had a battery array. And it wasn't until you started to get into electronics with like the transformer, and those are AC only because obviously DC won't go through a transformer. Well, I opened this up just to take a quick gander and confirmed my suspicion. You can kind of see that little black capacitor there, the one slightly higher than the other. It's hard to see on the camera, but it does have just a little bit of a bulge. Just not much, but enough to make me kind of... I'm feeding AC in from this adapter and I'm getting a 60 Hertz hum, which means I sketched out the little power supply, 12 volt AC in. The bad capacitor, I believe it's this one. Although where there's one, there's probably others. Just replace these three. However, if I put DC in through here, it will still function correctly. I just need to get enough DC voltage across here. And you know, I'll still replace these. There seems to be a short, and I bet one of these is probably very high leakage. Gross. Look at the goop. And if I take a look on the board where I pulled that out, look at that nastiness on the board. Yeah, that's definitely bad. This is the other one, and it tests okay on all the meters, despite the fact that this cap tested just horrible. Look what happens when I pull it out and then run off the AC supply. And then watch what happens, I have to look above the camera, when I pop it back in. So, despite testing in the picofarads, it's still doing something. I'm going to grab some different values and toy around here. And also, this not only feeds this 7805, but it also feeds something in here, the modulation that seems to be running again off of DC, but it needs a higher voltage. Because even though this 7805 can run at, say, like 14 volts in, and it's getting very warm, 5 volts out, so even though this is still running at 5 volts, this whole thing knocks out when the DC voltage is too low. Yeah, I put a little screw in there so at least it's heat sinking to here. After some consideration, the fact that this is just a smoothing capacitor, I put the next closest value I had going up in both voltage or capacitance. So I picked a 220 microfarad 50 volt. And as you can see, there's no more noise like there was before. So the output on this is working great now. I'm going to try some different DC power supplies as well, or see if I have another 12 volt AC power supply. I really, I don't know, I just, like, I don't want to leave this plugged in. Jeez, just no.
Watch your cartoon.
So here's just an update on the cable, in-house cable thing. I've added 2 more channels, 2 more analog channels, and if you look in the corner there, I've added some little corner bugs, those annoying things that TV channels started putting in the 90s. That one's really annoying, I might change that. Also added one here for the cartoon channel. This is just a local digital channel just being converted to analog so that older TVs can pick it up, and TVs that don't have a strong tuner, because this one's kind of weak. The usual weather channel. And mute. So this one is the security camera channel. I just unplugged the security camera for this. And there's music. Just gonna hit pause here for copyright, but it is hooked up to a Chromecast. So I can play some music throughout the house. And here's the heart of the operation, the ridiculousness. I think last time I showed this, this piece of plywood wasn't here. It had two of these RF modulators, and these do the Simpsons and then the Seinfeld and sitcoms channel. This is running the weather channel. And yeah, that's about it. And then this is a VGA to composite converter that runs off the NVR for the security camera. And what I've done is I've added this extra piece of plywood. There's another channel plus modulator. So these two 3024, 3024, and this is a 3025. The only difference is the channel range they're capable of. The 3025 has its control buttons on the bottom for selecting the channel. And this will go 14 to 64, I believe, on UHF. Then 65 to 125 cable. This one will go 14 to 36 on UHF, or 35, and then 36 to 94, I think, on cable. So these have a lower range. Not really a big deal for what I'm doing. You can't daisy chain 3 of them, I learned. You can daisy chain 2 of them. So this is a amplified antenna input. This is 3 amplified outputs, and then this is a non-amplified output. So you can daisy chain the non-amplified output to the antenna input here, but this, I believe, does have a booster. But if you do that again, then all hell breaks loose. So what I did is I just used one of these cheap coax splitters. And these cheap ones will just tie everything together. So I'm just using it as a combiner. So I have the amplified output from this one gang together with the amplified output from this one. And then that runs off to the house splitter. And then connected to this new one, I have another Raspberry Pi. So this is running that cartoon channel. Put a nice big 128 gig USB stick on it. This is a DTV converter box. And this is running that analog channel. I can change it to whatever channel I want. And then this iPod's running the music that you hear for the weather channel. I do plan on replacing it with maybe just a little cheap memory card MP3 player. Those are the ones you can order on like AliExpress or something. Kind of worried that this battery is eventually going to become a spicy pillow and be a problem for me, so that can't stay there forever. And then this is the crazy mess with the Chromecast. So this Chromecast is broken. If you can really see it, it's got a bit of a bend there. There's an incident with a swivel TV and a side HDMI port, so it's kind of unreliable. And I don't know if this converter will negotiate a resolution. So with Chromecasts, if you just plug it into a converter box and it doesn't negotiate the resolution, it will default to 1080. And I believe this is only 720p. So regardless, there'll be no video. But I'm just using it to spit the audio out and then run it all the way back here. So you have the music for the iPod. And then behind there is the music for the security channel from the Chromecast. I don't know how long I'm going to keep this running. This was a cool idea, but this converter gets absurdly hot. Like, I think this whole container is like an aluminum heatsink. So I might open it up and see what the hell's going on in there. This gets warm too. It's not super bad, but you can tell it's not meant to be running all the time. So again, these two, not entirely too sure if I'll keep them or what. But yeah, that's the new cable system. And just to address the power supply issue I was talking about earlier, I ended up taking the two 15-volt DC power supplies and running the two 3024s off of that, and the 3025 is just running off a 12-volt DC.
The Springfield police have told me that 91% of all traffic accidents are caused by you 6 guys. Sorry, no vacancies.
With a convention in town? Are you kidding?